The champagne glass left Grant Ashford's hand before anyone understood what was happening. It struck the marble 2 inches from his wife's shoe and exploded into 1,000 small blades of light. Nora Ashford did not move. 300 people in the ballroom stopped mid-sentence. A violinist's bow lifted off the strings and stayed there, suspended. Grant, handsome, 41, the face on the cover of 2 business magazines that spring, leaned close enough that only she could hear him. "You were never anything but a rental, Nora, and the lease is up." Then louder so the room could take notes, "Security, remove her." She was still holding the anniversary gift she had spent 4 months making, a hand-stitched leather book, 1 page for every year they'd been married. It slipped from her arms as the guards took her elbows. No one bent to pick it up. No one except the man in the black overcoat standing near the west doors. A man who wasn't on the guest list, but gathered the scattered pages as if they already belonged to him to understand why a woman gets thrown out of her own anniversary party like a bag of kitchen trash. You have to understand the 11 years that came before it. And to understand those, you have to start with a fire. Nora was 23 when her father's laboratory burned. Thomas Ray's had been the kind of man who wore the same brown cardigan until the elbows gave out, who forgot to cash checks, who could look at a broken machine and hear what it was trying to say. He had a small research firm in a converted warehouse outside Hartford, 9 employees, and a filtration technology he swore would one day pull clean water out of poisoned ground. The fire started at 2:40 in the morning. By dawn there was nothing left but a black skeleton and the smell. They told Nora it was faulty wiring. They told her the insurance had lapsed 6 weeks earlier, a clerical error, they said, a form her father had never signed. They told her the pats had been used as collateral on a bridge loan and now belonged to the lender, a holding company she had never heard of. They told her a great many things in a very short time, and she was 23 and had just buried her father in a coffin they'd advised her to keep closed, and she signed what they put in front of her. The lender was Ashford Holdings. She would not learn that for 11 more years. She met Grant 6 months after the funeral, in a coffee shop on 9th Avenue where she worked mornings and cried in the walk-in cooler on her breaks. He came in 3 days running and ordered the same thing badly, mispronouncing it on purpose, until she laughed. That was his gift. He could find the exact seam in a person where the light got in, and he could widen it. He said he loved that she wasn't like the women he knew. He said her hands looked like they made things. He asked about her father, and he listened, and when she said the word fire his face did something complicated that she read at the time as sorrow. She would think about that expression for years afterward. She would think about it the way you probe a tooth that has started to ache. They married 18 months later in a garden in Rhinebeck, and the Ashford family sat on one side of the aisle in a solid gray wall of disapproval, and Nora's side held 11 people, 6 of whom had worked for her father. Grant's mother, Vivienne, said one thing to her that day. She took Nora's hand, examined the ring like an appraiser, and said, "You must be very tired already." Nora laughed. She thought it was a joke. The first years were not cruel. That is the part people never believe. They were quiet and warm in places, and Grant was gone often, but he came back with stories and with his head in her lap. She stopped working. She was told, gently and then less gently, that Ashford wives did not work. She filled the hours with the only thing she'd inherited from her father, the compulsion to make. She restored furniture. She bound books by hand. She learned to repair the guts of old clocks, and in a house of 11,000 square feet, she carved out one small room with good north light and called it hers. Grant called it the hobby room, always with a small smile, and she let him, because letting him was easier, and because every marriage runs on a currency of small surrenders, and she did not yet know she was spending down to nothing. Year 5, she found the receipt for the hotel in Boston. Year 6, she found the second phone. Year 7, she stopped looking, which is its own kind of confession. And in year 9, on a Tuesday afternoon in March, she went into Grant's study to return a fountain pen she'd repaired, and the desk drawer was open, and inside it was a folder with her father's name on the tab. Nora Ashford stood in that room for 40 minutes and did not sit down once. The folder held 11 pages. She read them the way you read a diagnosis. An internal valuation of Ray's filtration systems, dated 4 months before the fire. A memorandum recommending acquisition via distress rather than negotiation, because the founder was unlikely to sell at any price. A loan agreement with terms so predatory they read like a trap, with the jaws already sprung. And a handwritten note in the margin of the last page, in an angular script she recognized from 1,000 birthday cards and grocery lists and permission slips. Make it clean. V.A. Vivienne Ashford. Nora put every page back exactly as she had found it. She closed the drawer. She went down to the kitchen and made dinner and asked her husband about his day, and he told her, and she listened, and she smiled in the right places, and later that night she lay in the dark beside him with her heart going like a bird against a window. She had married the family that had taken everything from her. The question was not whether she would do something about it. The question was what a woman with no money, no job, no allies, and no proof beyond 11 photocopied pages could possibly do. It took her 2 years to find out. She did it slowly. That is the only way it can be done. She started attending the charity boards Vivienne sat on, and she was so pleasant, so unthreatening, so ornamental that people forgot to stop talking when she entered rooms. She learned which lawyer had cried at his retirement party. She learned that the Ashford fortune sat on a structure of trusts that had been assembled in 1987 by a tax attorney who was now 86 and living in Sarasota with a grudge. She learned that her father had not been the first. There had been a machine tool company in Ohio, a biotech in Raleigh, a small shipping concern in Baltimore whose owner had died of a heart attack in a parking garage at the age of 52, 6 weeks after Ashford Holdings acquired his debt. Nora wrote none of it down at home. She kept it in a storage unit in Yonkers rented under the name of a woman who had been dead since 1994, and she paid in cash, and she drove there on the days she told Grant she was at the dermatologist. And in the 11th year of her marriage, she found the one thing that could actually hurt them. She found the sister. Which brings us back to the ballroom. The 11th anniversary party had not been Nora's idea. Vivienne had insisted, and Vivienne insisting was whether you did not argue with it, you dressed for it. 300 guests, press at the door. A photographer from a magazine that had, the year before, called Grant Ashford the last gentleman in American finance. Nora had spent 4 months on the book, 11 chapters, photographs, pressed flowers from the garden in Rhinebeck, the ticket stub from a movie they'd walked out of in the first year because they couldn't stop laughing. She had bound it in oxblood leather and tooled his initials into the cover with her own hands. She had also, 6 days earlier, put a sealed envelope into a safe deposit box and given the key to a woman she had met exactly twice. Both of those things were true at the same time, and if you have ever loved someone you were also in the process of destroying, you will understand how. The trouble started at 9:15 when Grant took the microphone. He was drunk in the particular Ashford way, no slurring, no stumbling, only a sharpening like a blade coming off a stone. 11 years, he said, and the room applauded. 11 years with a woman who came from nothing and never once let me forget how grateful she is. A ripple of laughter, uncertain, the kind that's looking around for permission. Nora stood at the edge of the dance floor with the book in her arms. People ask me, Grant went on, what the secret is, and I tell them find someone with nothing to go back to. The laughter died. He smiled at his wife across 40 feet of parquet and it was not a smile at all. It was a door closing. "Nora, sweetheart, come up here. Show everyone what you made me." She did not move. "Come on," he raised the glass. "She makes things, little books, little clocks. It's very sweet. 11 years and she still thinks that's a life." Somewhere near the bar, a woman said, "Grant," softly, the way you'd say it to a dog on a long leash. And that was the moment. Nora would replay it for the rest of her life. That Grant Ashford's eyes went flat, and she understood that he knew. He knew about the storage unit. He knew about the safe deposit box. He knew about the woman she'd met twice. "You've been busy," he said, and he said it into the microphone, and 300 people heard the tremor in it and had no idea what it meant. "You've been so busy." Then the glass, then the marble, then the guards. They took her out through the service corridor, which was the cruelest part, not the throwing out, but the route. Past the dish pit and the linen carts and the two young cooks who pressed themselves against the wall and looked at the floor. Past the loading dock where the rain had turned the concrete black. They set her down on the curb on 57th Street. One of them, an older man with a wedding ring, hesitated. "Ma'am." "It's fine," Nora said. It was not fine. She had no coat, no phone, no purse, and no key to a house she had lived in for 11 years. The rain came down like it had been waiting all evening for the chance. She sat on a wet bench across from the hotel's gold-lit awning, in a dress that cost more than her father's first car. And for the first time since the funeral, Nora Ashford put her face in her hands. That is when she heard footsteps stop in front of her. "Your father," a man's voice said, "used to say that the only honest weather is the kind that ruins your plans." Nora's head came up so fast the world tilted. He was perhaps 40. Dark overcoat, no umbrella, rain running off him like he'd made a private arrangement with it. He had the kind of face that photographs badly and reads unforgettably in person. All angles. A mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to be casual, and eyes she had seen before. She had seen them across a folding table in a warehouse outside Hartford, over a plate of cold pizza, when she was 19 years old. "Adrian," she said. "Hello, Nora." Adrian Vance, her father's last graduate student, the one who had shown up at 24 with holes in his shoes and a mind like a hunting animal, the one Thomas Reyes had called the best I'll ever teach, the one who had vanished 3 weeks before the fire and had not come to the funeral, and whose absence Nora had carried like a stone in her shoe for 11 years. She had spent a decade being told what Adrian Vance had become. Everyone had. Vance Industrial Group, water infrastructure across 4 continents. A man so private that a photograph of him had once sold for 6 figures. He had been for 11 years, a name she could not say out loud. "You didn't come," she said. Her voice was wrecked. "He was in the ground and you didn't come." "No," Adrian said, "I didn't." "Where were you?" The rain filled the silence. "I was finding out who lit the match," he said. Something in Nora's chest went very still. "It was faulty wiring," she said. "It came out automatically, the way a hand goes to a scar." "No, it wasn't." Adrian crouched down so their eyes were level, and up close she could see that he was not calm at all, that the stillness was a lid on something with a lot of pressure behind it. "Nora, listen to me. In 3 minutes, a woman named Pillar is going to come out of that hotel and get into a black car and disappear. And if that happens, everything you've built in that storage unit in Yonkers is worth exactly nothing." The world dropped out from under her. "How do you?" "Because I've been paying her rent," he said. "The unit next to yours for 19 months. Nora stood up so fast she nearly went over. "You've been watching me." "I've been keeping you alive," Adrian said, and for the first time his voice broke its banks. "Do you know what happened to Daniel Roth? Baltimore. Shipping. Heart attack in a parking garage at 52 in perfect health, 3 days after he hired a forensic accountant." He stood. "You hired a forensic accountant 9 days ago." She had. She had told absolutely no one. Nora, he held out his hand and rain ran down his wrist. I need you to come back inside with me. She stared at the hand like it was a live wire. Inside, she repeated. You want me to walk back into that room? Yes. In this dress, in front of those people, after what he just, her voice failed. Why on earth would I do that? And Adrian Vance said, because your sister is in there. The thing about a life-changing sentence is that it does not feel like anything at first. It sits on the surface. The mind holds it at arm's length and turns it, looking for the trick. I don't have a sister, Nora said. You have a half-sister, Adrian said. She's 31. Her name is Pilar Esteves. Your father supported her mother for 22 years quietly, and when he died the payments stopped and nobody explained why, and she spent 4 years trying to find out who he was. He paused. She's been catering staff at Ashford events for 8 months. She's the one who photographed the trust documents. She's the woman you met twice. Nora's hands had begun to shake. The woman she'd met twice. Dark eyes, a scar through one eyebrow, a way of tilting her head that Nora had found strangely, achingly familiar and had never once questioned. She knew, Nora whispered. She knew who I was and she didn't. She was afraid you'd hate her, Adrian's mouth tightened. And then she was afraid you'd get killed. Both, as it turns out, were reasonable. Across the street, the hotel doors opened and closed, spilling gold light and laughter onto the wet sidewalk. And Nora Ashford, soaked, shoeless in one foot, 34 years old and holding nothing at all, made the decision that would take the top off her entire life. What happens when I walk in there? Grant will have you removed again, Adrian said. Within 90 seconds, unless. Unless what? He reached into his coat pocket. What Adrian Vance took out was not a phone, or a document, or a weapon. It was a small box, worn at the corners, covered in a green velvet that had gone bald in places from handling. Nora made a sound she did not recognize. That's my mother's, she said. Your father gave it to me the week before he died, Adrian said. He told me that if anything ever happened to him, I was to keep it until you needed it more than you'd hate me for having it. He looked at her, and his composure finally, completely, came apart. I have carried this for 11 years, Nora. I have carried it through 4 countries. I have taken it out of my pocket in airports and parking lots and hospital waiting rooms and put it back, because it was never the right night. The rain came down. Is it the right night? She said. No, Adrian said. It's the only night. They came in through the main doors. There's a physics to a room like that, 300 people, an orchestra, the low roar of expensive conversation. And it changed all at once, the way a field of birds turns. It started at the back, near the coat check, where someone recognized the man in the wet overcoat and said his name too loudly. Then it moved forward in a wave, table by table, until it reached the dance floor and hit Grant Ashford square in the back. He turned around holding a fresh drink. His wife stood in the doorway of his anniversary party with her hair plastered to her skull, mascara down both cheeks, one heel gone, and her chin up. And beside her, dripping onto $40,000 of imported carpet, stood the one man in America whose water infrastructure contracts Ashford Holdings had spent 6 years, and a great deal of money failing to beat. Get out, Grant said, but it came out wrong, it came out thin. Adrian Vance walked past him as if he were a piece of furniture. He walked to the center of the dance floor, under the chandelier, in front of the press photographer who had already begun, on instinct, to lift his camera. Then Adrian Vance turned to face Nora and got down on one knee. The sound the ballroom made was not a gasp. It was lower than that. It was the sound of 300 people simultaneously realizing they were going to be telling this story for the rest of their lives. Nora Rays, he said, Rays, not Ashford, and half the room caught it and the other half would catch it later on video. 11 years ago I made your father a promise, and I have kept every part of it but one. He opened the green velvet box. Inside was a ring so plainly beautiful it looked out of place in that room, an old rose-cut diamond in a worn gold setting. The kind of ring a young engineer buys in 1986 with money he does not have. "Marry me," Adrian said. And Nora Ashford, standing in a puddle of her own making, understood two things at once. The first was that she was going to say yes. The second was that this was not a proposal. It was a move. Because here is what nobody in that ballroom knew, what Nora herself had figured out only in the last 90 seconds, standing on a wet sidewalk with her whole life in pieces. Adrian Vance had not come to save her. He had come because he needed something only she could give him, and marriage was the fastest legal way to get it. She could see it in the precision of the thing, the timing, after the humiliation, when the room's sympathy was hers and Grant's cruelty was on the record. The photographer, who Adrian had not once glanced at, which meant he had already known exactly where the man was standing. The word raise, deployed like a scalpel, resurrecting her father's name in front of every business reporter in the tri-state area. 11 years of silence, and then he arrives on the precise night she is thrown out. He knew this was going to happen, Nora thought. He knew before I did. She looked down at the man kneeling in front of her, and the ring, and her mother's box, and she thought about a fire in a warehouse outside Hartford, and about a sister in the kitchen behind that wall who shared her father's eyes. Then she held out her hand. "Yes," she said. The room detonated. What happened next took 11 seconds, and only 4 people in that ballroom ever understood it. As Adrian slid the ring onto her finger, he turned her hand slightly. A small, deliberate adjustment, the way you'd angle a page toward better light. And Nora felt it, a hard edge inside the band. Something folded, something hidden, pressed flat against the gold where a finger would cover it. Her eyes came up to his. Adrian Vance's expression did not change at all. "Don't look at it here," he said, so quietly it was almost a breath. "Not in this room, not tonight." "What is it?" Behind them, Grant Ashford was crossing the dance floor with 2 guards and a face like a burst pipe, and the orchestra had started playing again, because nobody had told them to stop. And somewhere near the kitchen doors, a woman with a scar through one eyebrow was standing very still with a tray of untouched champagne, watching her sister get engaged. Adrian's hand closed around Nora's. "It's the reason your father died," he said. Grant Ashford reached them with his hand already rising, and Adrian Vance did not so much as turn his head. "Photographers at your 4 o'clock," Adrian said quietly. "2 more by the bar. Whatever you do in the next 4 seconds is going to be on a screen in Tokyo by morning." Grant's hand stopped in the air. It was a small thing, a single arrested motion, but 300 people saw a man reach for his wife and then think better of it, and in that room on that night it was the same as a confession. "This is my house," Grant said. "It's a rented ballroom," Adrian said. "You don't own anything, Grant. You never have. That's rather the point of the evening." Nora watched her husband's face and saw something she had never once seen in 11 years. Not anger, not contempt. Fear. "Nora," Grant's voice dropped and the charm came back on like a light switch, and God help her, some animal part of her still leaned toward it. "Sweetheart, you're soaked. You're not well. Let me take you home and we'll—" "Say his name," Nora said. "What?" "My father, say his name." The orchestra played on. Somebody's fork rang against a plate. Grant Ashford opened his mouth, and nothing came out, because in 11 years of marriage he had never once said Thomas Ray's out loud, and both of them knew it, and now so did the room. Nora took Adrian's arm. "I'd like to leave now," she said. The car was a plain black sedan, 10 years old, which she had not expected. Adrian drove it himself, which she had not expected either. For 11 blocks neither of them spoke. Nora sat with her hands in her lap, and the ring turned inward, the hidden edge of it pressing into her palm like a splinter she refused to pull. "You knew," she finally said. "Yes." Not guessed, knew, that he'd do it tonight in front of everyone. Adrian changed lanes. 9 days ago you hired a forensic accountant named Ren Delacroix. 8 days ago her firm ran a title search on 3 dormant Ashford trusts. 7 days ago somebody inside Ashford Holdings flagged the search. His jaw moved. 6 days ago Vivienne Ashford chartered a plane to Sarasota. Sarasota, the 86-year-old tax attorney with the grudge. "She got there first," Nora said. "She got there first, she paid whatever it cost, and she came home knowing exactly how much you'd found." He glanced at her. "Grant was told to make you leave in a way that couldn't be undone. A woman who walks out of a marriage is a plaintiff. A woman who is thrown out screaming in a wet dress, with no phone and no money, in front of 300 witnesses, that woman is unstable. That woman is a jealous wife having an episode. That woman's storage unit full of photocopies is the sad hobby of someone who needs help." Nora felt the blood leave her face. "They were building a defense," she said. "They were building a diagnosis," Adrian said. "The lawsuit was the second step. There's a facility in Connecticut the family has used before. Voluntary admission on paper, 90 days. The city slid past the windows, gold and wet and indifferent. "And your proposal," Nora said slowly, "put me on the front page of every business section in America instead." "Yes." "So no one could quietly lose me." "Yes." She turned to look at him, really look, for the first time since the sidewalk. "You didn't ask me to marry you," she said. "You put me somewhere they can't reach." Adrian Vance did not answer for a long moment. "Both," he said. "It's both, Nora. That's what I need you to understand before you open that ring." He took her to a townhouse on Jane Street that had almost no furniture in it, which told her something about how he'd been living. She sat at a kitchen table under a single hanging bulb, still in the ruined dress, with a mug of tea she didn't drink, and she twisted the old gold band off her finger and tipped it into her palm. The strip of paper had been folded 11 times. Onion skin, the kind engineers used to use for tracing. It came out no bigger than a fingernail and opened into a rectangle the length of her hand, and on it, in her father's cramped, forward-leaning script, were 3 lines. A bank, a city, a number. And below them 1 sentence. "If you're reading this, sweetheart, then I was right about them and wrong about how much time I had. Everything is in the box. It was always yours. Dad." Nora put her hand flat over her mouth and made no sound at all. Adrian stood on the other side of the room, near the window, giving her the distance. "He knew," she said when she could. "He knew they were coming for him." 3 weeks before the fire he stopped sleeping at home," Adrian said. "He moved the master files. He rewrote the assignment documents. And then he gave me that box and told me to disappear." "Disappear?" Her voice cracked open. "You were his best student. You were the closest thing he had to a son, and you ran." "I didn't run," Adrian said. Something in the way he said it made her stop. He turned from the window, and under that bare bulb he looked 40 and 80 at once. "Vivienne Ashford came to me on the 14th of March, he said. "In a diner on Route 9. She had a folder too. She had photographs of my mother's apartment building in Bridgeport and my sister's school bus route, and she put them on the table one at a time in order, the way you deal cards." Nora's hands went cold around the mug. "She said I could stay and be brilliant, or I could go and everyone I loved could keep breathing. She gave me 48 hours. He looked at the floor. "I took 36. I went back to the lab and I begged him to sell. I told him it wasn't worth it, that it was just water that he could rebuild anywhere. And your father looked at me the way he looked at a machine that was lying to him, and he said, Adrian stopped. "Say it," Nora whispered. He said, "Adrian, if we let them have this one, there is no version of us left that's worth saving." The bulb hummed. "3 weeks later he was dead," Adrian said. "And I didn't come to the funeral because I couldn't stand in a room with you and not tell you, and I couldn't tell you without getting you killed. So I did the only thing I had left." Which was? "I spent 11 years building something big enough that Vivienne Ashford couldn't threaten it." He met her eyes. "And then I came back." The box in the bank in Hartford was opened at 9:04 the following Monday morning by Nora Rays, in the presence of a bank officer, 2 attorneys, and a woman with a scar through one eyebrow. Pillar had been waiting outside on the steps when they arrived, in a jacket too thin for the weather, holding a coffee she hadn't drunk. The sisters had looked at each other for a long, terrible moment. "I didn't know how to say it," Pillar said. "Every time I saw you I practiced it in the car, and then you'd smile at me like I was staff and eyed." Nora crossed the sidewalk and put her arms around her, and neither of them said anything else for a while. Inside the box were 4 things. The first was a certified, notarized assignment of the Rays filtration patent portfolio, executed 11 weeks before the fire, transferring every claim in it to a trust, with a single named beneficiary: Nora Elena Rays. The second was a second copy, filed and date-stamped by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, which meant it had existed in the federal record the entire time. Nobody had ever looked, because nobody had ever imagined a man in a brown cardigan being that careful. "They pledged those patents as loan collateral," one of the attorneys said, and he had gone a strange color. "Ashford Holdings has been licensing this portfolio for 11 years. There are municipal contracts. There are foreign governments." "He didn't own them," Nora said. Ms. Rays." The attorney sat down. "Nobody owned them but you. Every dollar of revenue from that division since the fire is, arguably, yours." The third thing in the box was a small cassette recorder with a labeled tape in it. The fourth was a photograph of a young man in a warehouse, holding a plate of cold pizza, laughing at something outside the frame, with a 19-year-old girl blurred in the background. On the back, in her father's hand, "The best I'll ever teach. Take care of each other." Nora looked up at Adrian, and Adrian looked at the wall, and his throat moved. The tape was 31 minutes long. Thomas Rays had recorded it in his car on the 6th of March, and he had done the thing that engineers do: he had documented dates, names, the threats verbatim, the 2 men who had come to the lab on a Sunday, the offer, the second offer, and the third one which had not been an offer at all. And at minute 22, a woman's voice, recorded on the other end of a phone call, cool and unhurried and unmistakable to anyone who had ever sat across a Thanksgiving table from her: "Mr. Rays, you keep speaking as though this is a negotiation. I'm calling to correct that. Vivienne Ashford." Nora listened to the whole thing twice, with her hands folded on the table. Then she said, "Play the last 2 minutes again." Because at minute 29, her father, tired, hoarse, alone in a parked car, had said one more thing, and it was not about patents. "And if it's you listening, sweetheart, and not a lawyer, I need you to hear this part. Don't let this turn you into them. They'll offer you a deal, and it will be a very good deal, and it will cost you exactly one thing. Take the truth instead. Take it in public, even if it's smaller." The room was silent. Nora turned the recorder off. "He knew there'd be a deal," she said. "There's always a deal," Adrian said quietly. "They'll offer one by Friday." They offered one by Wednesday. It came in a conference room on the 41st floor with a view of the park, and it came from Vivienne herself, because by then there was no one left to send. She was 79 and beautifully dressed, and she did not look afraid, and Nora understood that this was the woman's single great talent. She had never in her life looked afraid, and it had been enough. $400 million, Vivienne said. A structured settlement, confidential, paid over 8 years. You keep the patents going forward. The past stays in the past. Across the table, Nora said nothing. You should understand what you're refusing. Vivienne's voice was almost gentle. A trial takes 6 years. It will be brutal. They will put your marriage on a screen. They will find the antidepressants you took in year 7 and the afternoon you spent in a hotel bar in Tribeca, and they will build a woman out of it who is not you, and the jury will meet her instead. She folded her hands. I've watched 3 of these. The truth is not a weapon, dear. It's a very expensive hobby. Nora reached into her bag. She set the small cassette recorder in the middle of the polished table and pressed a button. Mr. Reyes, you keep speaking as though this is a negotiation. I'm calling to correct that. For the first time in her life, Vivienne Ashford's face moved. Not much. A tightening at the outer corner of one eye. But Nora had spent 11 years reading that face for weather, and she read it now. And what she saw was the exact moment a 79-year-old woman understood that a dead man in a brown cardigan had been more careful than she was. Nora stopped the tape. There is no deal, she said. There's just Tuesday. The story broke on a Tuesday. It broke the way these things break now. A single filing, then a photograph of a soaked woman in a ballroom, then 30 million views of a man kneeling on a wet dance floor, then, at last, the audio. It was the audio that did it. People will argue with documents forever. Nobody argues with a voice. The Department of Justice opened an inquiry into the Ohio machine tool acquisition in the spring. 2 municipal water authorities filed in the summer. The Baltimore family, Daniel Roth's widow and his 2 sons, who had spent 19 years being told it was a heart attack, filed in the fall. Vivienne Ashford was indicted on a Thursday in October and died 16 months later, before trial, in a house in Palm Beach with a view she had stopped looking at. Grant Ashford took a plea. He served 26 months at a facility in Pennsylvania where the men played a great deal of tennis, which offended a great many people on the internet, and Nora found that she did not care, because she had learned by then that revenge is a story that ends and grief is one that doesn't. He wrote her 4 letters. She read the first one. It said, among other things, I did love you at the start. That's the part I can't explain to my lawyers. She believed him. That was somehow the worst of it. He had loved her the way a man loves a house his mother bought him, carelessly, and with the deed in someone else's name. She burned it in the sink. Here is what most people don't know, because the internet lost interest after the sentencing. Nora Reyes did not keep the money. Not most of it. The settlement, when it finally came, was larger than the number Vivienne had offered in that conference room by a factor that made the lawyers laugh out loud in the hallway. She kept enough to be safe. She put the rest into a foundation and named it after a man who forgot to cash checks. The Reyes Foundation does one thing. It funds independent inventors, the ones with warehouses and 9 employees and no lawyers, and it gives them, for free, the single thing her father did not have. Not money. Counsel, a phone number to call at 2 in the morning when 2 men show up on a Sunday. Pilar Estevez runs the intake office. She is very good at it. She has a way of tilting her head when she listens that makes people tell her the truth, and it took Nora almost a year to stop crying every time she saw it, because it was their father's, and it had come down to both of them, and one of them had gotten it for free. The sisters have Sunday dinners now, 11 years of them and counting. Pilar cooks badly and refuses instruction. And Adrian Vance. The night before the filing, they sat on the floor of the empty townhouse on Jane Street, with a bottle of wine between them and no furniture to put it on, and Nora asked him the question she had been carrying since the ballroom. When Ashford's water division collapses, she said, who buys it? Adrian looked at the bottle for a while. Vance Industrial, he said. At what price? distressed. So you make money, Nora said. An enormous amount of money from all of this. Yes. You knew that on the sidewalk, in the rain, when you knelt down in front of 300 people and put my mother's ring on my hand, you already knew. Yes, Adrian said. And Nora Reyes sat with that for a long, long moment, in a bare room, with the truth on the floor between them like something that had been dropped and not picked up. Say the rest, she said. He set down his glass. The rest, Adrian said, is that I would have done it for nothing, that I have run the numbers on my own life every night for 11 years and they don't balance, and they never will because there is no version where I am the man who saved him. I am the man who begged him to give up and then left. His voice was very steady, which was how she knew what it was costing. I can't be that other man, so I made myself into the one who could at least be standing there when they came for you. And yes, I profited. I'd have profited if I'd stayed a coward too. That's the thing nobody tells you about money. It doesn't care why. Nora looked at the ring on her hand. Do you want me to forgive you? She said. No, Adrian said. I want you to know exactly what I am and then decide. She gave the ring back that night. Not out of cruelty. Because it was her mother's and it had been her father's before that, and it was the last honest object in a decade of lies, and it deserved to mean what it was supposed to mean or nothing at all. When I wear this again, she told him, it won't be a move. Adrian Vance closed his hand around it and said, all right. And he waited. He waited through the filing and the depositions and the 6 days in the spring when Nora could not get out of bed. He waited through the trial that never happened and the funeral in Palm Beach that neither of them attended. He waited without ever once making it her problem that he was waiting, which is, in the end, the only proof of love that means anything. They were married on a Saturday in October, 2 years and 4 months after a man threw a glass at his wife's feet in a rented ballroom. There were 9 guests. 6 of them had worked for her father. She wore the rose-cut diamond in the worn gold setting, and the strip of onion skin was back inside it, folded 11 times, because Nora had decided that some things should be carried against the skin where a finger covers them. There's a photograph from that day. It's not on the internet. It's on a shelf in a house in Rhinebeck, next to an older one of a young man in a warehouse holding a plate of cold pizza. In it, Nora is laughing at something outside the frame, the way her father used to. And this is the part of the story that people tend to sit with, long after the money and the indictments and the 30 million views have gone quiet. She was thrown out of that ballroom with nothing, no coat, no phone, no key to a house she'd lived in for 11 years. But she had never actually been poor, not for one day of that marriage, not for 1 hour. She had owned it all along, the patents, the portfolio, the ground the whole gleaming Ashford fortune stood on. It had been sitting in a federal record for 11 years, and in a bank box in Hartford, and folded 11 times inside a ring in a stranger's coat pocket. She just didn't know. That's the thing about the people who throw you out like trash. They're not usually wrong about your value. They're just terrified that one day you'll find out what it is.